Ring ring, it's time for another episode of Crossplay Conversations, the show where we dive deep into the world of video games while keeping it light. I'm your host, Luke Lewis, and this week I'm joined by the Wii U Wonder Kid, Jacob McCourt.
There's so many indie games coming at us. I need to talk about all of them, sorry.
We gotta do it. If only we had a podcast where we talked about indie games.
Oh, wait. We do.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. I have to say thanks again on air for sending some of the greatest cider from the West Coast. Shilling, this is not a brand deal. Wish it was. But I'm drinking some delicious apple pie cider from Shilling, so thank you for that.
Washington has the best apples, and I will absolutely accept a brand deal from any cider company who would like to entertain one.
Yep.
Email in bio.
If you ever come this way, I think Ontario has some pretty good apples too. We have something called, I think it's called Apple Cider Lane or Apple Pie Lane, where we have just a crap ton of cideries.
Like one street or cul-de-sac, or
like
what are we
within
talking
50
here?
kilometers.
Ooh, okay.
Within 26 miles or whatever you Americans do.
Canada just sounds magical. You got free healthcare, you got cider everywhere, people are nice. Like,
yeah, R.I.P. Sorry, the election's in 7 days. We aren't going to talk about that.
Oh,
But
yeah,
I'm
no,
thankful
we can't.
to be here.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's very fair. But everybody needs a good distraction right now, and these indie games certainly have been one for us. So we're going to run through our usual smattering indie roundup. We have 5 games we're talking about today. We're talking about Neva, Europa, Pinball Spire, Crypt Custodian, and Phoenix Springs. So multiple genres, multiple styles of games happening. Lots of fun to talk about there in the back half of the show. But let's kick things off with our icebreaker question, Jacob. Tonight we're talking about what will be your number 11 game of 2024? So we talk a lot about top 10 lists, the coveted top 10. Andy Cortez, it kind of funny, says, is it a contender? We think about what's going to make that list. But I'm curious, heading into Game Awards season, do you have some obvious picks that you feel like you're really excited about, you're really passionate about, but you feel like might get bumped to that number 11 spot?
Yeah, so I think I have 5 games that are absolutely locks that will not move from this list.
Love it.
And what I'm playing now, thanks to some recommendations from y'all, some recommendations from the Indie Council, I think I've got maybe like 10 or 11 more games I want to check out this year, and then that's it. Last year, my 11 game was Terra Nil, which was a very good game. And
totally.
Sometimes I'm like, yes, that was the right call to make that my 11. I have a feeling my 11 this year is going to be Children of the Sun.
Ooh, okay.
Which is the Sniper Elite psychedelic Sniper Elite from Devolver Digital. Really like that one, but that to me is like a bubbler, to take it from words from MinMax.
Totally.
What about you?
Yeah, I was kind of unpacking this question from a quality perspective of like, do I pick a game that I'm like, this is a pretty solid game. This is like a 7, 8 out of 10. Like I really enjoyed it, but it didn't like break through that upper echelon for me. Or is it simply a game that I didn't spend enough time with to feel like it justified against other games, which I feel like is kind of where I'm probably going to end up. My immediate thought was a game like Still Wakes the Deep earlier this year that I really enjoyed. Really solid, awesome horror indie narrative experience from the Chinese Room. If folks are looking for a good spooky game on Game Pass right now, it's a great one to check out. But that's one where it's like, loved my time with it, and I kind of forgot about it, you know what I mean? And so it feels like that'll probably slide into that lower half of the list if it makes my list at all, but I could see it being number 11. I also unfortunately could see a bigger game like a Dragon's Dogma 2 or an Infinite Wealth potentially sliding down there. But that's where we get into this solely just because I didn't spend as much time with it. And if I had really given it its full attention, it probably would have been in that upper half of the list. But it's a competitive year. I'm looking back at like what I've played so far and what I still have to play. It's like, it didn't necessarily feel like it at any one given moment, but I think this has been a really strong year for AAA and indie stuff.
Although, compared to other years, at least for me, I feel like my top 5 is pretty locked. It's going to be the 6 to 10 that I'm sure I'm going to have at least.
Anyone's game to some extent.
I don't know if you keep track of your 11s, but I also look back into my 22, and my number 11 for 2022 is Marvel Snap.
Mm,
So,
that's a good
and that was
game.
a weird one where I'm like, I don't know if I want to give this one a spot on my list, but I played a lot of it and I enjoyed it. And honestly, it's something that I still occasionally flip through. Although, frankly, these days whenever I have a couple minutes on my phone, I've been going to New York Times connections. That's been the thing that I've gone to. But I don't regret Marvel Snap at 11.
Sometimes you just need a comfort food game, and I feel like that's what Marvel Snap is for sure.
Agree. Agree.
Amazing. All right, we've held off long enough. Let's get into things. Let's do our fall indie game review roundup here. I want to kick things off with a game that I feel like I've had on my radar for a very long time, and I
Mm-hmm.
got to play it this weekend, and I've been excited to talk about it. This one's Neva
Yep.
from Nomada Studios. For folks that aren't familiar with them, they previously made the game Gree. Um, when I think of the studio, I think of like very artistically forward, very
Mm-hmm.
like almost like atmospheric, kind of abstract. I know, Jacob, you haven't had a chance to play Neva yet, but you have recently played Gree, so I'm kind of interested in like your perspective there, and then your anticipation levels for Neva. And then we can get into my time with it.
Yeah, I played Gris in the last like 2 months for the Left Behind Game Club. No, actually, I was going to, but frankly, I didn't really enjoy Gris. It was a beautiful, beautiful game to look at, and especially with the music kind of fitting in with the visuals, I was like, wow, as an interactive piece of art, this is cool. As a game, I think this is pretty boring. So I think Neva for me was the thing where I think Neva is almost the fully realized vision of what I wanted Gris to be, with combat that looked fun. So I guess my first question for you is how it play.
In short, it plays really well. I've
Nice.
really enjoyed my time with it. For context, I think I'm roughly about halfway through the game. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
particularly long game from what I've heard. I think it falls in that like 4 to 6 hour
Mm-hmm.
camp. So I'm at about like 2.5, 3 hours,
Mm-hmm.
give or take.
And it's divided by seasons this time, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. So that's kind of the narrative arc, and I'll try to keep like general spoiler-free vibes. I might talk about like the opening sequence, but otherwise I won't spoil like specific moments. But for folks that aren't familiar with this game at all, it is a adventure style puzzle platformer in the most traditional sense. You play as your character is moving through the world along with your wolf companion Neva, solving puzzles, maneuvering, and then you get into some different combat encounters. But the entire game is very like dreamlike, very
Mm-hmm.
storybook like, and it
Mm-hmm.
is this very like atmospheric experience as you're going through it. But yeah, I've really enjoyed my time with it so far. It's just the right amount of engaging and
Okay.
just the right amount of complexity. Like it's not at any point I would say stressful, but
Mm-hmm.
like the combat is involved enough where it's like, yeah, I'm dying here and there,
Okay.
and I'm doing platforming challenges, and there's some level of suspense that like, oh, this could not potentially not go my way, and I'll have to try again and you know strategize a little bit. So
How's
I
the dog?
appreciated that.
Is the
the
dog
dog is
cute?
the dog is cute. The dog, without spoiling, like evolves over time in
Nice.
terms of abilities and different things you're doing. You can pet the dog, which I know
Hell
is a
yeah.
very important point to reviewers, but that aspect I really enjoyed. It's very comparable to games like The Last Guardian,
Mhm.
or even maybe something like Concrete Genie, where you have this
Oh,
companion that you're moving through the world um,
Luke just wants to say
with.
Concrete Genie as many times as possible.
It's a good game, and it's a cozy, warm hug of
Mhm.
an indie game. Well, I guess Concrete Genie falls into that like it's a first party studio, but smaller team.
Mhm.
Anyway, Neva definitely falls into that like going on this journey with your companion. And I really appreciated that, and just little things like there's moments in the game where you like there's a mechanic in the game where you call out to Neva
Mhm.
to have them like come to you, or get out of a situation, or like there's like narrative moments where like something happens to Neva, and then you like interact with Neva in interesting ways
Mhm.
using like this one button prompt to do different types of interactions, which I thought was really cool. Yeah, it's just a really thoughtful, pleasant experience. It's arguably one of, if not the most beautiful game I've played this year. Like visually, it's just so stunning,
Mhm.
and it does some cool things with like camera's perspective and just like the way it's the cinematography of the shots and things and the way it's framed is really really cool.
It looks almost like Gris from an art style perspective, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Almost like how all Supergiant's games kind of carry that same look and feel to them while being different. It seemed like these games looked similarly.
Yeah, it's got that like signature like stylized watercolor,
Mhm.
very detailed but very like vibrant color, and more about that visual aesthetic for sure.
No spoilies,
Sure.
but how um what percentage do you think it is going to be for you to cry while playing this at some point?
Um, I don't think it's a spoiler to say I cried very early on. Um, it's I think it's comparable emotionally to like an Ori and the Blind Forest
Yep.
in terms of like hitting in all the right notes, hitting on the joy, hitting on the passion, but also hitting on the like distraught emotion. And this game's a big theme of the game is how you process loss and how that like influences the world around you. And so there's different like thematic ways they visually represent that. And you have a dog or a wolf companion, and so obviously like anytime animal companions are involved, like your heart's on your
Yep.
sleeve, you're hoping everything's going to be okay. And oh man, I'm always worried about my animal companion out there.
Honestly, even in movies these days, like one of my least favorite things is when they hurt the animal. I don't care
Yeah,
about the humans.
yeah.
Don't hurt the animals.
And I guess to give a like cursory warning for folks with this one, I would say it's like it's tasteful. It's not trying to be like scare the crap out of you or freak you out. Like this is a heartwarming like adventure that you're going on, but your emotions will be tested.
It's
So
something that if folks have watched the trailer, like one of the extended trailers,
sure,
that's the thing you're talking
that's
about, right?
that's the journey you're going
Okay.
on. Yeah,
So I guess watch the trailer if this is giving you any pause, and if you can make it through the trailer without feeling immensely sad, you're probably fine to play Neva.
for sure.
Um, when are you planning to finish this one? Are you planning to finish this one?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay.
This is an immediate. I would have finished it before the podcast. It was just a life and time and other things got in the way, but yeah, immediately this week I'll have it finished. I'm excited to see it through. I'm excited to see where the story goes because I know like friends of the show, Jill Grote from the Indian Former finished the game and has sung incredible praise, so I can't wait to see like the full arc.
Do you think so far, if the game stopped now, it would be on your game of the year list?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh
I think
wow,
it's a
okay.
pretty safe in that 5 to 10 range, I would say. It might break that. I haven't sat down fully and really sussed out my list yet because I've just been trying to play more stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, I am really loving it. Beautiful game. Brought me to tears. What more could you ask for with a game like this?
We are in game of the year crunch time, so uh let us know on Twitter how you're feeling about the game when you finished
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I'll report back. And I think Claire's planning to play this one as well, so we might do like a full spoilery discussion over on Lukewarm Games once we've both played it. So little tease there, little tease.
I'm hoping to get to it, so I think your words have maybe encouraged me to go a little harder at it, or maybe move it
Yeah,
up my list.
I would highly recommend it. And for folks that are interested, it's on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch. So literally anywhere you can play it. Devolver published, so it's got that quality stamp of approval. But yeah, I've really enjoyed it and can't wait to play more.
Love it.
But on the note of other visually stunning games, I want to talk about
Hey.
Europa, which was a game that I played. I think it was last October. Next Fest was when I first played the demo.
Mhm.
But I want to hear all your thoughts. This is the like adventure style, Studio Ghibli art style inspired. Hit me with it. What did you think of this one?
So this is a game that I played. I think I finished it maybe 2 weeks ago, and I just haven't had a chance to say words about it yet. So here I am to say words about Europa. In this one, you play as a little humanoid boy by the name of Z, And Z's thing is he can sort of fly and float throughout the world of Europa, which, surprise, we're literally talking about Jupiter's moon, Europa. And so you are exploring. It's weird in the news lately how we're talking a lot about how we can terraform Europa, and maybe it's actually a better planet to terraform than Mars. Um, but they have terraformed Europa, and so there is life that is living on Europa. Except something happens, and I'm trying not to get spoilery, but essentially something happens, and there is next to no human life on this planet. And so your job is to kind of fly around the planet, explore, solve some pretty light platforming puzzles, and avoid enemies. There's no real combat in this one. It is very much like if there are things that fire upon you, if robots fire upon you, you are just avoiding those robots. But the thing I really liked about this one is, as you said, it is beautiful. Even on Steam Deck, the art in this thing and the draw distance that you're able to get even on Steam Deck is pretty cool because you can move pretty quickly through this thing. And the fly float mechanic is the best part of this game. The walking on the ground in this game sucks, but probably deliberate because the flying floating is so good. And so you can essentially use your abilities to fly up, to float down, to collect power ups as you're flying and floating, to keep in the air, and that's kind of the best part. So if you're looking for a game that is incredibly breezy, that is beautiful, that is really just there for you to experience a story told to you principally through, I will just call them audio logs, where your I forget if it's your father. It's either your father or your grandfather. I think it's your father who is essentially talking to you through audio logs, and that's how the story and the narrative goes forward. It's story light, but I think there's a fun twist in the game that I won't reveal. So all in all, like I'm pretty happy with my time in Europa. You played the demo, but is it something that you've wanted to check out yourself?
Yeah, it's definitely been on my radar. I loved specifically like the locomotion, like you were talking about, just like moving through the game. It feels really nice to explore the world, and I thought the visuals were incredibly stellar. I'm curious, over your time playing, did you feel like the gameplay loop evolved, or like the level of platforming challenge that you were encountering increased, or did it kind of just maintain this, like, use the word breezy? And that's not a bad thing. I'm just kind of curious, like, how the game progresses, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would say that some of the enemies, get a little more challenging, and frankly, the thing that I loved, after walking on the ground, the thing that I liked the least after that was actually the combat, which the combat is truly like avoiding enemies shooting at you and usually deactivating them with a switch or a series of switches or something like that. Um, didn't love the combat even when it ratcheted up. It doesn't ratchet up a lot, but it ratchets up a little. Truly, the best part of this is breezing around and exploring. Um, it's something that I was over really quickly. Like I think I only played it for about 3 hours, and I got to the end of it. And it's one of those games. You know how games typically are like, "Oh man, here's another boss battle," or "Oh, here's another
Here's
phase
the
with the
new
boss."
biome, or
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
This thing was over sooner than I thought. There was a sort of final section, and I thought like, oh, there's probably going to be a final boss, even though like you can't really do bosses with the mechanics. And there wasn't. The game was kind of over. So, um, no, it's breezy throughout. So if like breezy exploration, fun locomotion, fun movement is your shtick, it reminded me a lot of Wave Tales from maybe
Okay.
18 months ago, and I really liked that one despite having issues with it. I'm kind of in the same boat here where I'm like, it's breezy. There's not much to it. There's parts of it that I don't love from a game design perspective, principally like some of the movement stuff off the ground, and then I almost didn't need the combat. The game could use a little more signposting. The camera occasionally would get hung up if you like turned a corner really fast to move from like there's some pretty big. They almost look like old school European columns. If you kind of move quickly between them, sometimes the camera gets caught. But all in all, I really enjoyed my time with Europa.
That's awesome. Yeah, it looks also like it probably be a good, like, family friendly one
Yes,
for
absolutely.
folks.
Yes.
And the difficulty level too you're mentioning, I feel like I have, we're approaching the age now where we have friends that have children. And so I do occasionally get the question of like, what's a current game that I can play with my kids? And so it's nice to have this one in the back pocket. And yeah, beautiful. And if you're a fan of the art style, like, yeah.
And
That's
this one's
awesome.
available on PC and Switch,
Cool.
so it's in the most popular places. It's something you can take on the run. So,
Nice.
especially as you're going into the holiday season, if you're looking for something that's, this is a, I don't know exactly what I call it, but a Luke Lewis, like, sit down with your hot coffee and enjoy a game in one sitting.
Oh,
This
you're
is,
speaking my language. You
yeah,
texted me while you were playing this one, and you said if you like just Jusant, which
yes,
was
that
one of my
too.
favorite games last year, that this would probably resonate. Of like, and I'd throw Neva in there as well. Of like this like cathartic, almost meditative,
Mhm.
just nice thing. We need more of those. So
It's a
I'm
little
no
less
complaints.
dewy than Jusant,
Okay,
but
yeah,
still
that makes sense.
same ilk for sure.
Mm-hmm. Nice, amazing.
Again, shout out to I think Future Friends for sending me a code for that one. That was Europa, developed by Nova Dust and Helder Pinto on Switch and PC.
Fantastic. Moving right along, you also played Pinball Spire.
Yeah, this is from Apparition Games, a developer from Oakville, Ontario. I actually got
Hey,
hands on with this one. It was an Indie.io title that I got hands on for a little bit at PAX West and said, "Ooh, this is good. I'm gonna play this when it comes out." And again, shout out to Apparition. And I'll find out who sent the code, but for getting a code on this one as well. I played about 2.5 hours of this one, which from the sound of it, I probably got to about the 50% mark, but it is a pinball Metroidvania. If you've played Yoku's Island Express, it's kind of the same vibe, except instead of it being sort of a more traditional Metroidvania, you are just moving up a tower, up a spire, and going through levels where you have to hit switches and accomplish goals, and then move up into like the next section of the Pinball Spire. I'm not good with my hands, so this one got a little challenging. I've got a final impressions kind of, I don't want to call it a review, but a final impressions article that I posted on the Gaming Brief about it, where I didn't want to give this one a score because I'm just not good enough to finish it. It's something that you get certain powers throughout, like the ability to light a flame or to slow down your ball so you can hit the ball perfectly. So let's say that you've slowed down time. There's sort of a guide that shows up to be like, this is exactly where your ball is going to go, so that you can hit the switches that you need to. Sometimes you have to use multiple power ups at the same time, and it's tied to mana. Like, you have a mana gauge where you can only use your powers a certain amount. So for me, as a bad gamer, it was a little challenging. And even though there are accessibility features, which I appreciated, that can extend your mana burn, or there's a couple accessibility options that make it easier, I think the default is actually kind of challenging. So it's one that I won't be finishing. But if pinball is your shtick, if you're a pinball fan, this is a must play.
hell yeah. Did you ever play Pinball FX at all back in the day? I know it's
Yeah,
like
that was
still
like the
kind of a thing.
platform that had all the tables, right?
Yeah, and they would do
No.
like DLC where it was like, here's this month's Spider-Man table and
Yeah.
this
Did you play
month's like
pinball
X-Men table.
FX?
I did at the time, and I really dug it, and it was a
Hmm.
fun sensation to have a like quality virtual pinball thing. And because it's one of those things where it's like, do I need a video game of this? Like, I like to go to a bar and play a
Hmm.
pinball thing, but I do like when video games take the mechanic and then do something gamified that you couldn't do like in a physical pinball cabinet. So I definitely appreciate what Pinball Spire is going for. It sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, as you move up the spire, like, sure, there are some tables, I guess you would call them, or sections that are samey,
Mm-hmm.
but the world slowly evolves as you make your way up the spire. And so the last level that I was left on kind of had a space theme to it, where it's a relatively big table, and in the center there's the sun, and then there's a bunch of planets that are sort of going around the sun, and you have to figure out a way. There's clouds around. There's almost like a cloud belt around the clouds, so you have to like burn up the cloud belt and then move the planets in a way so that you can shoot yourself across the table to hit switches, and then move the planets again to figure out a way up to the top of the table. So some light puzzle solving in there that I
Okay.
appreciated.
Sure.
Not for the faint of heart, maybe from a difficulty standpoint, but
For
one
sure.
that I enjoyed my time with.
I mean, half the battle, if it feels good and it feels like pinball and it's doing some interesting things, yeah, I'm definitely intrigued. And
Mhm.
this one is Steam only.
Yes, this one is Steam only
Okay.
for the moment. Again, this one's being published by indie.io. So again, thank you to them for sending me a code to check this one out. Whenever there's a Canadian indie, I gotta check it out. So
Hell yeah.
shout out to Apparition Games. Tom Voros, I believe, is the dev's name. We've been going back and forth a little bit on Blue Sky. A
Nice.
cool thing where I tweeted the review and then he saw it and said, "Yes, this is great," and I agree with you. Like, let me read the tweet out just to make sure I get it right. From Tom, but essentially, in essence, it was, yeah, hey, you're totally right. This is great. Oh, here it is. Tom said, wow, thank you for the review. I appreciate the feedback on difficulty, and I'm glad you mentioned the tuning options available, hoping to make improvements in this area.
Right on.
So, shout out to Tom.
I imagine, like, to go into game dev on a side tangent, I imagine it's very difficult to like nail difficulty well.
Yes.
If you're like, if you made it, if you're really good at it, like that's your like perception of it, it would be hard to like take that hat off and like imagine and put yourself in the seat of a gamer who doesn't. So
Well, I mean,
definitely
imagine if you don't get a lot of playtesters too. You can get
sure.
like certain people who are very good at games, so you tune the difficulty based on that. And there's only one difficulty option in this one.
Sure.
So maybe if there was multiple, it wouldn't be an issue. But yeah, man, I'm sure difficulty is one of the many things that are hard about game dev.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, keep an
Uh,
eye on Pinball Spire.
I think it's your turn. We're in game number 4.
Let's do it.
So please tell me about your time with Crypt Custodian. This one is from Kyle Thompson, being published by Top Hat Studios. Did you enjoy?
I did enjoy. This was one for listeners of the show. You might remember when I got COVID and I wasn't able to go to PAX East. I played a bunch of demos at home that were available from the show floor, and this was my favorite that I played easily. We love a solo dev. For folks that aren't familiar, Kyle Thompson made a game called Islets. If you're familiar with that one, I think that's how you say it. Came out in 2022. That one's a 2D style Metroidvania, if I recall. But anyway, looping it all back to Crypt Custodian, it is an isometric Metroidvania action adventure game. Similar in style to games like Death's Door, I would say, in terms of you're unlocking power-ups and different abilities. You're uncovering different parts of a map, and then you are moving through the world. The game is really funny. The whole premise of the game is that you're a cat who has been sent to the afterlife, and you start breaking pots because you have a broom and you think that's what you're supposed to do, but it turns out you broke all the pots of Satan's pots. Satan is named Kendra in this world.
Okay.
And Kendra sentences you to be a crypt custodian. So you have to spend the rest of your days cleaning up the crypts of the afterlife. And so you're running around as your little cat character and you're smashing enemies with your broom, and you quickly start to get different power-ups and abilities where you can leave a trail of mines to defeat enemies and unlock different powers, and it's really, really fun. It has a great gameplay loop. It's definitely that like one more run. It's quite challenging. There's some fun. I've found that in recent games like Link's Awakening or in this game, I do enjoy isometric platforming, if that makes sense. Like it's a fun perspective that we don't always see, and I think this game does it quite well. And there's something really satisfying about uncovering a map in a Metroidvania that I think this game also does really well. So if you finish games like Prince of Persia or maybe Metroid Dread and you're looking for another Metroidvania fix, I think this is a really solid one to check out.
How Metroidvania-y is this? Because I played a few this year, and I've kind of gotten to the point in my life, and I don't know what happened. One day I woke up and said, I think I'm done with Metroidvanias. Having played a little bit of Ultros, which I'm like, this seems very good. Having touched the Prince of Persia game and said this seems very good, but just didn't stick with me. Is it
Sure.
something that Metroidvania fans or maybe non-Metroidvania fans should consider, just on the strength of the combat and the platforming in it?
Yeah, I would say I think the gameplay is really strong, and I think the setting and tone and writing is all engaging enough that it's worth seeing through. And I think the challenge is a nice balance of engaging but not frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
Like I died quite a bit playing, but I always just wanted to jump back in and give it another go, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe try exploring a different area
Mm-hmm.
instead. I think it also has a pretty solid map. It's not Prince of Persia levels where you're like taking screenshots and remembering things, but I also would say, based on, I haven't completed the game, but I've put about 6 or so hours in.
Oh wow,
And in my time with it, I've uncovered some different areas. I've fought some major bosses. Along the way, you're making friends with different characters, so you're like collecting friendships. So I've collected a bunch of friendships.
nice.
Um, this game's just really good vibes. So I would say, if you're on the fence about Metroidvanias, um, I would still give this one a recommendation. If you if you watch a trailer or you play a demo and you're not interested in just the tone and vibe, I would say then maybe it's not for you. Like, it's not gonna
It's not going to bring you
transcend.
in.
Yeah, but if you like any number of components involved, like if you like Metroidvanias, if you like wacky, funny cat custodian vibes, if
Mm-hmm.
you like some solid combat and some solid exploration, any combination of those, I think you're in for a treat.
Okay, okay. It definitely, like, when I saw it immediately, I was like Death's Door. I liked Death's Door, but that had way less Metroidvania to it, and so I don't know if it's gonna grab me, but it definitely did look cool. I guess another one to add on to the ever growing list of things to check out before the end of the year. This one just came out in August of this year, and I just missed it. It came out while we were at PAX West, basically.
Yeah, I was keeping an eye on it just because it was one that, like, I had wish listed, and I like followed Kyle on social, so I was keeping an eye on it. And this was another one that was just really, because it hit overwhelmingly positive on Steam
Mm-hmm.
really quickly. It scored really well critically on OpenCritic as well, and so it was really fun to see Kyle get that reaction and get that like support from those that played the game at launch, because definitely well deserved. I also want to give a shout out to the puzzle design. I
Hmm.
think is quite fun. There's some different puzzles where you're using your broom and you're like batting balls of light energy to power doors, and you have to like, you have the crypt, and there's different areas, and each room is a little different in terms of like the block placement and platforms, and so you're moving things around, and it was very satisfying. But once again, not like crazy complex, but
Hmm.
just the right amount of engaging, I thought.
Cool. And this one's out on basically everything. It's like
Yeah.
PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series, Switch PC.
Yep. I played on PC mostly, and then I played on Steam Deck a fair bit, and it's a
Mhm.
great Steam Deck game as well. So
Man, that indie game machine, hey?
it really is. It really
Hmm.
is.
I really can't imagine having, being someone who kind of bought one on a whim. Not a whim, but I was like, I hadn't been planning for it, and I just said, fuck it, let's go. And it almost is my principal way to play games these days.
Yeah, same, honestly. I think I waited for it to I like messed around with yours at a
Hmm.
PAX, and I was like, this is solid. And then I think it dropped like $50, or like had a Steam sale, something
Hmm.
or other, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm in. Let's do it.
Um, that is Crypt Custodian. Um, any other thoughts before we move on to our last game here?
I don't think so. Highly recommend. 2 thumbs up. I'm excited to play more. I think this one will kind of be my palate cleanser that I play a little bit of here and there between bigger games, but enjoying it for sure.
I have one more game to talk about. I played Phoenix Springs. This one is by Calligram Studios. Again, shout out to the homies at Plan of Attack for sending a code for this one. I've got a final impressions on thegamingbrief.ca where I've sort of ran through my thoughts on Phoenix Springs. But I was very curious on this one. Friend of the show, Travis Colnut, was like mega into this. to the point where he played it on day one that it came out. It is a psychedelic point and click adventure game in the most traditional sense, where you play as Iris Dormer, who is a reporter who's trying to figure out what happened to her brother, and the mystery that is around her brother's disappearance, where it comes in with Phoenix Springs, which is a place, but also maybe more than that. Do you like point and click adventure games, Luke?
I do. I'm a big Monkey Island person. I like, Mighty L stuff in more recent times, but yeah, definitely a genre I enjoy.
So anytime you see a cross that's telling you to click on things and make them interact, you're excited, right?
I'm like, for audio listeners, I lean forward with my hand on my chin, like, oh, let me see what's going on here.
So what you're saying is that Phoenix Springs might be the game for you.
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
I need to call out a few things.
Please.
Art style, freaking unbelievable on this thing. It reminded me a lot. You've got sort of a noir Spider-Man poster in your background for the YouTube viewers, but it reminded me a lot of like Detective Comics from the 40s, 50s, 60s, just from a color palette and illustration perspective. Everything, beautiful lines, beautiful bold lines, a lot of yellows, greens, blacks, and the characters, when they got really close up, almost looked like they were part of a comic book pane. And when you pulled away, because there were some shots in the environment that were kind of done from far away, the environments were just beautiful. So when you make it to the titular Phoenix Springs, as an example, there's a shot that when we talk about best looking games of the year, Phoenix Springs will be a part of that conversation. There's a red bridge that almost is like the very clean, like red bridges from Japan sort of vibe. That's the vibe you get with the bridge, and just a beautiful forest in greens with some yellows and some blacks. And that is a shot that I will remember in this game for a long time, just because it was so gorgeous. Beyond being gorgeous, the voice acting is really great too. I'll shout out the voice actor in a moment here, but the performance by Iris, who sort of carries all of the VO in this, or carries their narrative forward, either through narrating what they're doing or by sort of explaining how they're moving from one location to the next. It was very melancholy, the delivery, but it worked so well for this game. Playing it is a very traditional adventure game, where you are moving between, I think there's about 6 different locations, where you're sort of piecing together a very loose mystery on what is happening with her brother. He is involved in biotech, so there's sort of a very light mystery that sort of unravels over time. Psychedelic is a word that I like to use both in describing what it looks like, but also the vibe, in that I'm usually a person who loves the story to at least point in the direction. If it's not really overt about the way that the story ends, then I want you at least to point me in a direction and say here, or at least I talk about the prestige a lot. Sometimes I want the prestige. Like, you misdirected me, but I want you to tell me at the end that you misdirected me. This game will leave you with a lot of questions. So if you are a person who wants to dig in Reddits or talk to other people that have played to kind of figure out what your interpretation of the game is, this one is for you. But if it's something that you want a beginning, middle, and end, and not just vibes, this one might not be for you.
Okay.
A lot of words, Luke.
You've said, yeah, I want to double back to a couple points you made. I'm very intrigued, me personally. I believe I first saw this one during a 6-1 Indie Showcase, I want to say, so shout out to the crew over there. But yeah, this one's incredibly striking. It gives me very like art film A24 as an adventure game, think
like
piece,
Scanner Darkly kind of vibe.
Yeah, okay. So that said, everything you're saying about the narrative has me interested. I don't always like to have a game that I have to like think about and unpack and talk to folks, but like, I think about Alan Wake 2, one of my favorite games of last year, absolutely being that game where you like take your own conclusions away and then water cooler moment with friends and suss out how you feel about it overall. Like, I think that can be a really powerful experience. Couple questions. Claire and I love to play things like Monkey Island together, things like detective style games. adventure games, is this something you could play with another person, or is it so atmospheric that you kind of want to be like headphones on solo experience versus like interacting with somebody else while you're playing it?
I hate to give you a non-answer, but let me give you both
No, that's fair.
perspectives.
Yeah.
The non-answer here is atmosphere is well enjoyed alone. Dark room,
Okay.
screen on, headphones on, them's the vibes. However, some of the puzzles are somewhat obtuse, and having two brains might benefit you. Where I
Okay.
will not lie, and what I appreciate, and something that I don't think I've ever seen before, but in the actual menu of the game, you can access a tips menu. And the tips menu actually just sends you out to Calligram Studio's website, where there is a walkthrough that is a very, very high level walkthrough that just describes kind of where you're at in the game, and it gives you like hints. I've never seen a studio do that themselves, where they're like, no, don't go to IGN or the Gamer. Go check out our walkthrough that's linked in the game menu.
That is
Appreciated that because I
Does
needed
it drop you where you are, or like roughly like within that level?
No, so it's essentially in the main menu of the game, not the actual menu itself. So you have to exit the game,
Fair enough.
go to the main menu, access tips, and then I was playing it on Steam Deck, which I don't think it's certified for Steam Deck. So unfortunately, it does not work on controller. So it is something that I had my Steam Deck plugged into my TV, and I had my mouse sort of with me, sort of mousing through, and that worked really well. But it's really something that I'd recommend. This is a PC-ass PC game.
Okay.
But having the two brains might be helpful.
Okay.
And then this walkthrough mechanic I really enjoyed, and I think more games should do it.
Yeah,
especially ones that are incredibly story focused.
Totally, that's awesome. And then I guess closing question for this one: how does this compare to other games within the genre that you've played? Do you feel like it is a new like benchmark, or more of like a this was really interesting and I'm glad I spent my time with it?
Yeah. I did not love Phoenix Springs. But it is because I am not, like I said, someone who likes, like I kind of like to be directed and told what's going on, what happened. But I can very much appreciate this game and say, beautiful, stylish. I know what it like after talking to someone, like talking through it, I kind of got more out of it. But you know, if you see the trailer and you're like too artsy for me, might not be the game for you. I definitely, when I think of point and click adventure games, there are some that maybe are a little bit more whimsical or have a little more comedy that I'd go to first. So like Broken Age is one that I think of often, that is just like performance and story that I love, and humor. And even something like Duck Detective from earlier this year, I really like that because it had great vocal performances and great comedy in it. Maybe I just want comedy in my point and click adventure games, because I even like the old Sam and Max games back in the day. So maybe that's more my vibe. Or really, I want ultraviolence or like Consequence, like a Telltale's The Walking Dead. I didn't dislike my time with this one, but I think that it's not one that I loved, and that is more of a me thing. If you see it and you go, "Damn, that's artsy as fuck," and you know, neo-noir point and click is words that get you excited, like please dive into this one because it'll be worth your time.
Hell yeah.
And it's one that I think I completed in maybe about 3 hours. Like, it is not that long.
I love the fact
I played
that
it for 4 hours, actually, exactly.
I think in under 20 hours a listener could beat every game we played today, or that we talked about today rather.
Yeah, and
that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Look, it's the fall release season. We got bangers coming out, and Phoenix Springs will definitely be one that, from art direction, if it doesn't win awards, I'm going to be mad about it.
That's very fair. That's very fair. All right. Okay, I think that brings us to a close. Anything to shout out for the good of the order? I know you had some reviews that we'll link to in the episode description. You had some recent travel that you're going to be talking about, some future content. Anything to plug?
No. I spent the weekend at GDEX in Columbus. Again, thanks to the team at GDEX for getting us a media pass for the event. So myself and friend of the show, Katie Lesperance, went out to Columbus to spend some time with the Ohio podcasting crew, Asa Green River, Dave Jackson, Dan from The Greatest Story Ever Played. And we just played some cool video games. So on the Left Behind Game Club,
Oh yeah.
Tomorrow, based on if you're listening to this on the first day, we've got a GDEX episode where we're going through sort of our 10 favorite games. I think it's 10 or 9. It's 9 or 10 favorite games that we played. So I would say that's the thing that I want you to check out if you're listening to this. Definitely after the first day of release, then you'll be able to listen to it. No issue. That's what I'll plug. What you gonna plug this week?
Love it. I'm gonna be really ominous and say that I have a cool thing happening over on Lukewarm Games before the end of the year, and you should subscribe to that feed and keep an eye on stuff because we're making moves. As
hey
the
Luke,
kids
what
say.
kind of moves are you making?
Big moves.
Big money moves. Okay.
That's all I'll say. I know that's very ambiguous, but it's just like, I'll say that.
Should I just leak it?
No, you shouldn't.
Okay.
You should not.
You're doing a wedding planning episode. That's it, right?
You know what's funny about that? This is a very side tangent before we cut the recording, but so I've gone down a Reddit stories podcast rabbit hole, and a lot of those episodes turn into discussions of weddings because there's a lot of wedding discussions on Reddit, and Claire really enjoys the r/weddings. And I have had a thought of like, do we do an episode of the pod where we just read some bullshit wedding stories and unpack it and commiserate about wedding planning? We might do that.
It sounds like you'd need a small gaming angle where like maybe 1 or 2 of them are about gaming and then the rest are not.
Yeah, or like, because we don't do it anymore, but we used to do Patreon bonus episodes. So like maybe we just throw it up on the Patreon, but it's like free public or something. Listeners, if you want to hear us unpack wedding nonsense, let me know. Because it's a pretty entertaining time.
Love.
Did the mother-in-law wear white to the wedding? Let's talk about it.
Ooh.
It's a tease. It's a tease for a podcast that doesn't exist.
I love that. Well, I guess subscribe to Lukewarm Games. Subscribe to the Left Behind Game Club. You'll get some games. You'll get some non-games. And maybe some fun surprises.
Indeed. But until then, we are setting our status to away until next time. But I'm going to ask you to do 3 things for us to help us out. If you can follow us on Twitter at Crossplay Convos, send this podcast to a friend because that's how people hear about podcasts. And of course, give us a review on your podcast platform of choice because it really, really does help. And with that, never stop listening to gaming podcasts.
Boo!
I'm so sorry. Bye, everybody.